I had this question recently. What do you say to a Jehovah's Witness who denies the mishandling of sexual assaults, or the fact that they kick children out of their homes when they're still young? What do you say to a Jehovah's Witness who wants evidence of the Watchtower Society's misdeeds? Now, bear in mind, I don't think you should shove this information in their face and scream it at them, saying, "Look what your organization supports." I don't think that's going to help anybody. It might make you feel better for 20 minutes, but it's just going to lock them into their position even longer, make them even less likely to accept evidence when it's presented to them. So we're going to want to approach it nicely and calmly. Either way, you guys should have the evidence on hand if you're ever asked for it. So let's take a look. Let's get into it. So there are a couple areas I really want to focus in on. First, I want to talk about their mishandling of sexual abuse cases, and then I want to give you proof of their mistreatment of kids and disfellowshipped people more generally. Lots of Jehovah's Witnesses have no idea sexual abuse stuff is even going on, but so many heard rumblings of it that the governing body had to come out and talk about it.
As an example, think about the apostate-driven lies and dishonesties that Jehovah's organization is permissive toward pedophiles. I mean, that is ridiculous, isn't it? If anybody takes action against someone who would threaten our young ones and takes action to protect our young ones, it's Jehovah's organization. We reject outright such lies.
So obviously it's reached far enough to get the governing body members concerned. Here's the thing, when you're dealing with an audience like that, if you draw attention to something, it makes the problem worse. So with Philip DeFranco, for example, when all that BetterHelp stuff blew up, not many people really knew about it until he did a video trying to debunk it on his channel. Now all of a sudden everybody knows about it. With Jehovah's Witnesses, they pretty successfully isolate their members from the outside world, especially from media about Jehovah's Witnesses. That stuff is forbidden, unless it has a positive spin or it can be used to their advantage by turning them into victims or something like that. Then they spread it all over. But the governing body felt like this negative story about them covering up abuse was affecting them so much, or was such a big risk, that they came out and addressed it publicly. That really blows my mind. These people didn't know about it before. Now a good portion of them are going to go home and break the rules by reading up on it themselves. They're banking on the mind control, keeping a tight grip on them. Here's what they planned with it. They were hoping they'd be able to poison the well. That basically means they tried to prime their members for the information. They were afraid they were going to hear about it anyways, so they released the story themselves, in a light that was a lot more flattering to them. So they controlled the story. They called it an apostate lie. They made it sound ridiculous. It's all part of the manipulation. So was there anything to it? Let me give you guys a breakdown of what happened. There's something called the two-witness rule, and the two-witness rule comes from the Bible. It was intended to help in disputes over things like farm equipment sales, or the sales of people, or whatever. You know, civil disputes. Normal stuff. Well, Jehovah's Witnesses' long-term goal and expectation is for the government to be completely destroyed, since it's run by Satan. They don't really consider themselves members of any country. They consider themselves Jehovah's Witnesses first and foremost. So what they've done is they've set up their whole structure to work kind of like a government. They work you to death. They have you out in the field knocking on doors, studying your literature, going to meetings non-stop. You are heavily integrated into this society. So the plan is for elders to act kind of like police or investigators, except they don't have crimes, they have sins. Anytime there's a sin committed, the elders investigate. If it's bad enough, they'll bring you in front of 3 elders and ask you very specific, detailed questions about the sin. But here's the catch. There have to be 2 witnesses or it didn't happen. 2 witnesses or 2 victims. Victims count as witnesses in this case. They also ask the 2 witnesses about the sin. So if, for example, the 2 witnesses are 2 6-year-old molestation victims, they'll bring them in a back room individually with 3 older men and ask them very specific, detailed questions that should never be asked of a child, ever, even by a therapist, even in a courtroom setting. Just shouldn't be done. Certainly not in that way, certainly not that bluntly. In some extreme cases, 2 witnesses aren't necessary, like if the person confesses themselves or if they have evidence of the wrongdoing or something. Then they'll put them on trial. It's called a judicial committee. If they find the person guilty of a grievous sin, then they'll disfellowship them. And their ultimate hope with disfellowshipping is exactly the same as the hope was when the Catholic Church started shunning hundreds of years ago. The entire town was run by the Catholic Church in those days. If you were excommunicated, you couldn't buy food. Nobody would sell to you. You get kicked out of your house by your family. The hope is that you just wander off into the woods and die. And that's the long-term plan of the Watchtower Society now. They intend to control so much that when they disfellowship somebody, they won't be able to buy food or rent a house or talk to anybody because everybody around them will be Jehovah's Witness and they won't be anymore. Okay, so that's how their system works. If they want to have their own pseudo-government set up, whatever. I don't care, honestly. But there are stipulations to that, as long as they recognize the actual government, and as long as they don't violate human rights, then I don't care. But here's where it gets sticky. Obviously, they violate Articles 18 and 20 of the UN Declaration of Human Rights on a daily basis by forcing people to stay in the religion or to lose their friends and family members. I'll get to that later. What I want to focus on now is the fact that they pretend they aren't part of a larger society. They don't want to be part of a larger society. They view themselves as the final authority, or more accurately, I guess they view Jehovah as the final authority, and they view themselves as Jehovah's eyes, ears, and hands, making his will done on earth. So instead of being instructed to call the police when there's a report of sexual abuse, they were instructed to turn the names over to the governing body. This is all stuff you guys have heard before. So where's the proof? That's what this video is all about, right? The proof is right here. I linked it in the description, and you can take a look at the pages for yourself here on screen. There have been a bunch of lawsuits against the Watchtower Society because of this exact situation. Offenders would assault a child, it would get reported to the elders, and then they couldn't do anything because there was only a single report. So the offender would move to another congregation and offend again because nothing was being done. Police weren't being called, nobody was being reported. All because of their 2-witness rule. They want to establish the sin before reporting it. Except it isn't a sin, it's a crime. And they aren't a government, they're a religion. There's a distinct difference. They actually legitimately don't have the right to do what they're doing. And that's the exact reason they're getting sued out the wazoo. That's why they're getting in all this trouble. Now let's give this documentation a little read. I'm starting halfway down page 5. Remember, this is a publicly available court document. Don't take my word for it. Here's the evidence of their impropriety. Read it for yourself. It's in the description. This is part of the factual and procedural background section of the report. It says, around September 27th, 1980, Campos, by the way, Campos is the predator. It says, Campos became an agent of Watchtower. In 1982, Campos molested a minor boy. Watchtower was aware of Campos's actions, but did not report him to the police or take any action to prevent further abuse. In 1986, Campos molested another minor boy. Watchtower was informed of Campos' acts, but did not report him to the police or take any action to prevent further abuse. Then it says, in early 1997, Campos became associated with the Pacifica congregation. 2 of Watchtower's agents, who knew about Campos's molestation of children, were appointed leaders of the Pacifica congregation. Both Pacifica congregation and Watchtower were aware of Campos' acts. Okay, next paragraph. It says, in April of 1994, Watchtower received a letter from a parent who claimed Campos molested his child and asked for Campos to be investigated. Watchtower forwarded the letter to Pacifica congregation and instructed it to investigate the matter. Pacifica congregation did so and then confirmed that Campos had molested the child and that Watchtower was aware Campos had molested a child before January 1st, 1987. Okay, so the Watchtower Society had instructed the congregation to investigate this guy because they had reports that he had assaulted some kids. And after investigating, they concluded that yes, he had assaulted the kid, and they knew of another kid he had molested before the report even came in. Yet they didn't report him to the police. Let's continue reading. It says, Padron and his family were associated with the Pacifica congregation. Campos frequently spoke at religious services for the Pacifica congregation and had leadership position within that group. Padron and his family met Campos through their involvement with the Pacifica congregation, and Campos was able to integrate himself with Padron's family. In 1994 or 1995, Campos molested Padron on multiple occasions when Padron was 7 or 8 years old. So like I said, that was the factual and procedural background section under allegations. That's what was being alleged. Now here's the discovery issues section. On January 16, 2015, Padron served a deposition notice for the taking of the deposition of Watchtower's person most qualified, or PMQ, to testify regarding a number of topics. Included with the PMQ deposition notice was a request for production of documents. Although that request consisted of 29 separate requests, the request critical to the underlying dispute is request number 12. That request sought all letters, emails, facsimiles, or other documentary, tangible, or electronically stored information of any kind Watchtower Bible and Tract Society received in response to the Body of Elder letter dated March 14, 1997. Okay, so Padron's lawyers requested any responses the governing body received to a letter they wrote on March 14, 1997. Let's keep reading. The March 14, 1997 letter instructed elders to send a written report to Watchtower about anyone who is currently serving or who formerly served in a Watchtower-appointed position in your congregation who is known to have been guilty of child molestation in the past. Watchtower said this information should be kept confidential and instructed elders to place the reports in a special blue envelope. The March 14th letter also reminded elders of prior letters stating that when a known child molester moves to another congregation, a letter of introduction should be sent to the new congregation, and copies of the letter should be sent to Watchtower in a special blue envelope. Watchtower served objections and responses to the Padron deposition notice, including the request for production. Regarding request for production number 12, Watchtower only objected and did not agree to provide any responsive documents. For reference regarding this case, it's been a while since I looked into it, but as far as I can remember, the Watchtower Society ended up turning over the documents they wanted, but they'd redacted so much from it that it basically made it unusable. And as far as I know, eventually the Watchtower Society ended up agreeing to a multi-million-dollar settlement, so they didn't have to turn the list over after all. So that section of the documents are a paper trail showing us that the list of names does exist. As early as 1994, elders were instructed to record the names and send them to the headquarters. But the most concerning part about the whole thing is that the letter explaining to elders what they're supposed to do in cases of molestation like that didn't contain any instructions to have them call the police. And in most cases, they didn't call the police. Well, Australia caught wind of this, and so they decided to launch their own investigations. I'm linking a source to the Australian Royal Commission's summary of the situation in the description too. Take a look at it. For those of you who don't know, here's the definition of a Royal Commission. A Royal Commission is a major ad hoc formal public inquiry into a defined issue in some monarchies. They've been held in the UK, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and Saudi Arabia. Royal commissions are called to look into matters of great importance and usually controversy. So it's basically like a hearing called to investigate something serious. Well, they called the Australian Royal Commission to investigate the Jehovah's Witnesses situation, and here's what they found. I'm quoting from the article. The Royal Commission examined evidence from case files held by the organization, which recorded allegations, reports, or complaints of child sexual abuse by 1,006 members of the organization. The Royal Commission found children are not adequately protected from the risk of child sexual abuse in the Jehovah's Witnesses organization, and does not believe the organization responds adequately to allegations of child sexual abuse. From the evidence presented, the Royal Commission considers the Jehovah's Witness organization relies on outdated policies and practices to respond to allegations of child sex abuse, which were not subject to ongoing and continuous review. Included in these was the organization's retention and continued application of policies such as the two-witness rule in cases of child sexual abuse, which the Royal Commission considered showed a serious lack of understanding of the nature of child sexual abuse. It noted the rule, which the Jehovah's Witness organization relies on and applies inflexibly even in the context of child sexual abuse, was devised more than 2,000 years ago. The Royal Commission found that Jehovah's Witnesses organization's internal disciplinary system for addressing complaints of child sexual abuse was not child or survivor focused. Survivors are offered little or no choice in how their complaint is addressed. Sanctions are weak with little regard to the risk of the perpetrator reoffending. This whole trial was really interesting because because they subpoenaed the governing body members, and the ones who decided to show up lied their faces off. They swore an oath on their own copy of the Bible, the New World Translation, and they lied under that oath. They said things that were objectively untrue, presumably with the goal of protecting the organization. I'm guessing they justified it under their theocratic warfare doctrine. You can lie or cheat or do whatever it takes to protect Jehovah's organization. I'm linking the entire video to the testimony in front of the Royal Commission in the description. There you go. There's the evidence. I intended to get to evidence that the Watchtower Society endorses mistreating children who get disfellowshipped, or disfellowshipped people generally, but I didn't think I'd have as much to say about this subject as I did. I'll cover that subject next time. Anyways, that's all I've got for you. Don't forget to check out my Patreon. Anything you guys can do to help me continue to fight this kind of thing is appreciated. As I've said in previous videos, small amounts like $1 a month are a lot more reliable. I can expect that more consistently than I can large number donations. Everything makes a difference. Also check me out on social media like Twitter and Facebook. And check out my podcast where I debunk Jehovah's Witnesses' new book called Pure Worship of Jehovah every Thursday night. Okay, thanks for watching, guys.